Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of BlindEyeLive NFL Free Agency Day 2 edition. I am your host, Blind Eye himself, Hunter King, owner, proprietor, only employee of Blind Eye Media, the greatest, well, a semi-decent internet radio startup, whatever you want to call it. And I'm glad to be with you this afternoon. On the docket today, we have more free agent news. I have some numbers for some contracts yesterday that I wasn't quite certain on. A correction to something I stated about contract structures. Yesterday referring to Taysom Hill and his contract that he just signed with the Saints. And my top 10 2021 NFL draft draftable quarterbacks. So let's get into it. I'm going to start with the correction on Taysom Hill's contract. So yes, Taysom Hill did sign a 4-year, $144 million contract. All years voidable. Basically all money voidable, which is interesting. I really don't understand why they signed the number unless it was just to troll people. Or they think that Taysom Hill's going to win the starting job and be really freaking awesome and be deserving of a $140 million contract over 4 years. I think that's what, $35 million per year? So yeah, what I said yesterday was teams could basically structure the base salary is like $1 million, $1 million, $27 million, $1 million if you signed a 4-year, $30 million contract. That's not true, or at least it wasn't true. And it probably still isn't exactly true, but there was a rule that the salary in a given year couldn't be any more than 25% greater than the salary of the year before, or something like that. There used to be stronger restrictions, but I can't remember if it was in specifically the new CBA from last year or if it was in negotiations based on COVID. So this is even more temporary, or more a temporary thing than something that was negotiated in the latest CBA. There is more leeway. I don't know how much leeway exactly, but based on a lot of the restructurings I'm seeing, it's definitely way more than like that 25% like year-to-year thing. So I don't know exactly how extreme it is, but Taysom Hill did sign a 4-year, $140 million contract, which is just wild. Even if it's basically a fake contract. It's a real contract, but everything in it can disappear with no repercussions. It's weird. So beyond that, some QB deals have come out since the show yesterday. Ryan Fitzpatrick has signed with the Washington Redskins. Sorry. They're not that anymore. The Washington football team. That is years of just calling them by that name. I don't know why they didn't just shorten it, just say they were the Washington Skins. Now that I think about it, that might have been an interesting workaround. You change logos and stuff, but people already called them the Skins for short anyway. But then would they have to play every game shirtless? I digress. So Ryan Fitzpatrick is the presumed starting quarterback of the Redskins now. 1-year, $10 million deal. The guy was basically middle of the road quarterback last year. Actually, I want to say his advanced stuff numbers really liked him. Although his TD to interception ratio was 13-8. I didn't really love that. But Fitzpatrick was really good last year. He's a capable starter. I mean, he's into his late 30s now. I think he'll be 37 to start of the season. I think 37. But he does not have any real severe physical decline. His arm seems perfectly fine. And as much as it sucks that Alex Smith won Comeback Player of the Year and everything, they were 5-1 with him at quarterback. But he was really limited. Alex Smith is probably at this point a backup quarterback and a mentor for a young quarterback. And you hate to say that because of what the guy did to get back, but at the same time, we have 7 or 6.5 games worth of tape on him, and he wasn't very good. That the defense really carried the team. The offense did enough. Really, it had more to do with the playmakers around Smith that the offense really did anything. I mean, he didn't make mistakes, which is great, but he also wasn't. Alex Smith wasn't making game-winning plays. He's not making game-changing plays that, only the best quarterbacks can make. Fitzmagic at this point, better quarterback option. And they're only paying him $10 million. I say only, that's a lot of money. But I mean, comparatively in the market. And I would say that Washington should be a better team this year. And they also did re-sign Taylor Heineke, who started the playoff game and kept him in it against Tampa Bay. So maybe there will be a QB competition there. And I think Kyle Allen's technically still got a year on his contract there. So the Redskins have options there. I do not see them drafting a quarterback this year. If things go south for them, obviously they'll probably make a move next year. And they might still try and make some kind of big move for the future next year. But if they make big improvements this year, or should I say, if they build on last year, and this year actually have a winning record, and make the playoffs again, it would make sense for them to then, on top of that success, make a big play for either a younger veteran quarterback than, say, a Ryan Fitzmagic. Man, I've gotten to where I call him Fitzmagic instead of Fitzpatrick. Or move up in the draft to get a young signal caller. Although, to be honest, this would have been the year, I think, that you would want to move up, because I believe there are 5 legit first-round quarterbacks. Which I'm going to get into those draftable quarterbacks here later in the show. But Ryan Fitzpatrick to the Redskins, I think, to the Washington football team. And I think that was a really good move. And now it's just focusing on getting weapons for that offense. I absolutely believe that pick 19, the Redskins will be taking a receiver to pair with Terry McLaurin and tight end Logan Thomas. So, yeah. Other quarterbacks that have signed deals. Jameis Winston is also returning to the New Orleans Saints. It's a 1-year, $4 million contract with incentives that can take it to, I think, $12 million. Yeah, 4 mil. It's or it might be 4.1 million, but I think it's 4 flat, and it can get up to 12 million with incentives. Cam Newton back with the Patriots. I talked about it yesterday. That deal, it's a $5.1 million deal with incentives that could take it to 14 million. So pretty good deal for the Patriots and Saints on both those contracts, because if they don't succeed, I mean, you're paying $4 or $5 million for, quarterbacks that are better than pretty much any other team's backups. Although, you're kind of, but you're hoping that they play well enough to justify you having to pay them all those incentives. Because if you're paying them all those incentives, things are probably going well. So I like that. There was another contract, so the Patriots that I missed yesterday. After Cam, you had well, I'm just going to go down through the Patriots because they've been the biggest players in free agency. The Patriots right now, this is what they've done. Just talked about the Cam deal. They signed Nelson Aguilar, who had a really great bounce back season for the Raiders. And they signed him to a 2-year, $26 million deal, which means like they have Justin Edelman will be back to be kind of underneath. Aguilar is a deep threat. He also can play in the slot really well, but and run like underneath stuff. But this is a guy who's going to stretch the seam, take top off of defense, and make plays downfield. That's something the Patriots need, and a type of player who should mesh really well with Cam Newton if Cam Newton can get back to the Cam Newton he used to be before the shoulder surgery. Although I'm kind of surprised that he's back with the Patriots. Like, maybe they are more aware on where his medicals are than obviously they are than I am. But then other reporters and league insiders are on his availability, or I mean on his shoulders recovery. So Nelson Aguilar, they signed Jonnu Smith. I mentioned that 4-year, $51 million contract, and then this morning it was announced that Hunter Henry has also signed with the Patriots. So the Patriots snagging the top 2 tight ends in this free agent class. Henry's deal is a 3-year, $37.5 million deal with, I believe it was $22 million guaranteed. So basically the first, or most of the money in the first 2 years of the contract's fully guaranteed. And actually, probably based on the structure, it's probably the money for the first 2 years are fully guaranteed. And the third year is probably like $15-16 million non-guaranteed. And I believe Jonnu's contract, it was like half the money and it was guaranteed. Or probably similarly, like the first 2 years were pretty much fully guaranteed. Or maybe fully guaranteed, and then Jonnu had a little more, or a little bit of the salary in year 3 guaranteed. So those are 3 big offensive weapon like signings there. So you're now looking at a pass catching group for the Patriots of Aguilar and Edelman and former first round pick Nikhil Harry, who 2 years in is not looking great. Which not a super surprise to me because the guy doesn't really separate. He's not like, it's not like he's a bad route runner, but he doesn't create separation on his routes. And so far, he has not been physically dominant at the catch point either, which you have to be if you're not going to create separation. You have to be a Mike Williams, or if you're not going to create separation. You have to be a Kelvin Benjamin, like during the first couple years of his career with Carolina, if you're not going to create separation on your routes. And Harry just, it's year 3. I mean, he's a young guy. I mean, obviously guys can improve. Heck, Nelson Aguilar, which he had a good season a few years ago with the Eagles during their championship run. But then he kind of fell off. And then last year with the Raiders, he popped off last year. So obviously guys can improve, but Aguilar could create separation on his routes. Some of his problems was consistency with his hands. And sometimes seemingly like just losing track of the ball. Whereas Harry, it just seems like he doesn't have great speed. I mean, he ran a 4.6. Like, yeah. So, but that's like, you got Aguilar, Edelman, Harry, Jacoby Myers, and some other guys that I can't really think of off the top of my head for the Patriots right now. They probably should draft a wideout in this draft. And considering they brought back Newton, and I'm guessing they haven't given up on Stidham necessarily yet either at this point at quarterback, it's highly possible that they draft I wouldn't be surprised if they draft a receiver at 15. With the moves they're making, this seems like New England gearing up to trade down and just amass picks and do their usual. Or I could also see if Micah Parsons slips, like I could see the Patriots being a landing spot for Micah Parsons. Because I would say that their linebacker group needs improvement, or just needs an infusion, like they're off-ball linebackers. So, although I think it's possible Parsons might actually be more of a hybrid strong side backer who mixes getting after the quarterback with kind of doing more roving. Or I could see Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, who I talked about yesterday, being a good fit for the Patriots because of his well-rounded skill set. He's a little bit on the light side as a linebacker. Played most of last season at like 215, 220. But I really like him. I mean, this is a guy who can... He was playing basically slot corner for the team. They were staying in their base defensive personnel against 3 wide sets, and he was covering, or he was lined up on the wide side of the field for them, or the open side of the field, the side of the field that had the most space on it. And he would cover a lot of slot receivers and 3 wide sets. His tape is insane what they were doing with him, and his abilities allowed the other players on Notre Dame's defense to keep their jobs more simple, and it made life easier on everyone. And I just think a player like that is going to translate immensely well to the NFL level. So I think he'd be a fit with New England. But like I said, so you've got their wide receiver group. Then you've got a tight end group where you have Jonnu Smith and Hunter Henry, who if you combine their stats from last year, it's like, I think like 100 and 10 catches. Somewhere between like 100, 110 catches. Like, I think like around 1,200 yards and like 14 total touchdowns. It's pretty good. And that's also considering that the Chargers had Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and like to use their running backs in the pass game like Austin Eckler. And then for Jonnu Smith, like the Titans run the ball a ton with Derrick Henry. And we had A.J. Brown go over 1,000 yards as our number one receiver, and Corey Davis come close to 1,000 yards. I think it was like 984 receiving yards as our number two receiver. But Jonnu had 8 receiving touchdowns and 1 rushing touchdown. And actually, if you include his rushing yards, I think like I want to say he had like 120 rushing yards, or like he had a decent amount of rushing yards. Maybe I'm a little exaggerating. Maybe it was like 8 or 9 carries, but he averaged like some ridiculous amount of yards per carry. Maybe it was like 70, 80 yards rushing, but Jonnu's incredibly versatile. The Patriots, absolutely, like I said yesterday, they miss the days when they had Gronk and Hernandez, or Gronk and I think Gronk played with Watson one year. Like Watson came back to the Patriots for like a year or something. There was another secondary tight end that did pretty decent for them with Gronk, and I can't remember his name now. But they're looking for that multiple tight end, and they still have last year's mid-round picks. Devin Asiasi, I think he was. Man, I can't remember where he went to school now. And who's the other guy? Was it Izzo that they drafted, or no? It was Dalton Keene, I think was his name, and then they have Ryan Izzo, who has been on the roster for a few years. And young tight ends like Asiasi and Keene didn't really have a huge impact, even though they gave him every opportunity to do stuff. Like tight ends tend to take a while to translate, so. And then on defense, Patriots, Matt Judon, 2 years. Or no, sorry, not 2 years. It's 4 years, $56 million, with $32 million guaranteed. 4 years, 56 million, 32 guaranteed, and which I thought was a great contract because Judon really fits the style that they want as a more powerful style, 3-4 edge or 3-4 outside linebacker. Really good at controlling or setting the edge in the run game and controlling the edge in the run game, but also able to convert speed to power. He's not like blazing fast, but he's got a good first step, and he's more of a power rusher. He's not, more the kind of guy who's going to and more of a guy who's going to counter move than just blow the doors off of somebody. So I thought that was a good deal, especially considering a guy in Leonard Floyd, who finally was productive this year or this past year with the Rams, alongside Aaron Donald and Michael Brockers, and and in a defense that was coordinated by one of the best young coordinators in the league, in Brandon Stokely, Brandon Stokely? Brandon Stokely was a wide receiver for the Colts, I think. It's something B. Stokely. But anyway, their defensive coordinator, Stokely, who's now the Chargers' new head coach. I think 4 years, $64 million for Floyd was a massive overpay. Now maybe he is productive, but a lot of people don't realize or are forgetting, like, this guy's already, like, he's going to be 29, if I'm not mistaken, at the start of the season. And he's just coming off his first double-digit sack season, 10.5 sacks. He was a athletic kind of freak, and that's why he ended up shooting up to, I think he ended up going number 11 or number 9 in the draft he was in. But his production wasn't, like, amazing at Georgia. And his production with the Chicago Bears wasn't amazing. And the Rams, like, yes, everyone thought Dante Fowler Jr. was kind of meh when he eventually moved from the Jaguars. But part of that problem was he missed, like, his whole rookie year because of an injury. But Fowler had 2 great years with the Rams and parlayed that into or was it 2 or 3 good years with the Rams? Either way, he parlayed multiple good or really good years with the Rams into a 3-year, $45 million contract last year with the Falcons. And he still looked good with the Falcons. So maybe Leonard Floyd, the Rams, it's for real, but that defensive coordinator is now gone. And who's to say he's going to repeat this performance? I don't know. I'm not as optimistic. I'd rather have a guy in Matthew Judon who has been consistently impactful in not just his pass rushing, but also is a great run defender in that spot. And is coming from a system with the Ravens that what he did for the Ravens should translate directly into what the Patriots are going to ask him to do. Judon I think that was a really good move, snagging him. And then the Patriots also signed safety Jalen Mills to a 4-year, $24 million deal. Like, that's $6 million a year. And yeah, I don't. Like, he was pretty good last year for the Eagles, and actually, in terms of out of defensive backs who played 300 or more snaps, he had like the 5th best. I'm trying to remember exactly what this stat was called that I was reading. He was basically the 5th best defensive back in the NFL in terms of cut or completion percentage into his coverage compared to the expected. So like he was minus 12%. Like the completion percentage into his coverage was 12% percentage points lower than would be expected based on the throws or based on the throw, the quarterback involved, receiver involved, whatever, which was 5th best in the NFL. Now, advanced stats in the NFL are not as good, and they're not to me, they are not as precise as they are for, say, like baseball. Baseball is math. Basketball has become very math. Very much like, there's still more room to color outside the lines in basketball, but analytics are really strong there. Analytics in soccer actually are pretty good too. But for football, man, like there are certain like more team oriented or like certain statistic or certain like DVOA and DYAR, which I think do a pretty good job of capturing like value and value compared to the other, other players, other teams, other units, like relative, over the course of that same period of time. But like Pro Football, I'm just going to put it, Pro Football Focus, their grading system works better for some positions than others, and they do a terrible job of grading like linebackers. Like particularly like to me, their coverage grades. I don't, and their grading system just does not accurately portray like players' actual value. Like I think their rating for Devin White last year was like in the 50s overall. Devin White was incredible last year. Now, a lot of his values derive from blitzing, and he plays the run really well, but he's also a pretty good coverage backer. And I would just say that Pro Football Focus needs to step up their game. I am not like some advanced statistical whiz, but I have half functioning eyeballs. And I can watch games and I can tell who's good and who's not. I can tell who's like doing their job and who's not. Devin White is an all-pro level linebacker already. So if you're grading him in the 50s on a 100-point scale, you're wrong. And you need to fix your stuff. But I love Pro Football Focus, but I also hate it. Devin White, subpar linebacker. But yeah, so Jalen Mills, though, in this coverage metric, which I'm still kind of questionable how they get their logic on how they define whether that ball should have been more catchable or whatever. But anyway, apparently he rated top 5 in that metric among all defensive backs as a safety. But like Jalen Mills has been kind of meh his entire career. He's got great tools, and maybe he's better at safety. He's always been a fairly physical player, so maybe this is a good thing. He should be able to play both safety spots and be kind of versatile for them, and play like slot corner, because he played corner in college and he's played corner pretty much his entire pro career with the Eagles up until this past season. So $6 million a year is not like a terrible ton of money, but I don't know. Considering like you've got Devin McCourty on the roster, you got Patrick Chung. Although Chung's up there into his 30s, he's had some injury stuff, but he'll be back. And then you drafted Kyle Duggar last year, who's kind of like a safety linebacker hybrid who also seems to be able to play in the slot too. Like, got a lot of versatile pieces, and pretty deep at safety. So they probably look at Mills as someone they can move around their secondary. So that's going to be interesting, that the fit there. But all in all, Patriots, Cam, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Nelson Aguilar, Matt Judon, Jalen Mills, and trading for Trent Brown and then renegotiating his contract and getting that number down. And all it cost you was swapping your 5th round pick for the Raiders' 7th round pick to get Trent Brown. And then you were able to trade out Marcus Cannon to basically kind of recoup that that value lost in the draft from the Trent Brown trade. And Brown is definitely pretty much an upgrade over Cannon at right tackle. And remember, Marcus Cannon sat out last year, so I don't know. I think that was a good move, and that will allow them, with Brown coming back, and they found it's like Isaiah Wynn hopefully will be back healthy and will be their left tackle this year. I think it was like 6th round pick, 7th round pick. What was his name? Onyewu. No, Onyewu was he played like defensive mid and center back for like the U.S. men's national team for years. Onyenwu. I think his first name is Michael, but he was like and everyone saw him as a guard. And he played like really great for them at, I believe, right tackle last year. So they could slide him or Wynn inside. and their offensive line should be solid because which is probably what's going to happen because Joe Tunney, who they franchised last year, offensive guard, signed a 5-year, $80 million contract with the Chiefs. This guy's not made a Pro Bowl, not made it all pro team. That's not to say he's not good. He's dependable. He's above average. And he's durable. But this is the richest long-term deal any guard has gotten in the history of the NFL. This is offensive tackle money. Because I want to say that's almost as much money as Taylor Lewan got on his extension from the Titans. And Lewan's like a really, really good left tackle. So, and his cap hit's going to be really low in year one, from what I saw. So, we'll see how that works out for the Chiefs. I mean, well, it should work out. Which they cut both Eric Fisher and Mitchell Schwartz, which both of them missed time last year with injuries. Fisher's an all right left tackle. I would say was a middle of the pack left tackle. Maybe the 20th best left tackle in the league. And they were paying him pretty good money. So I got cutting him. Cutting Mitchell Schwartz hurts, but he's starting to pick up some injuries, and he's on the wrong side of 30. But he had been basically the best right tackle in the NFL for most of the past decade. So that's going to be tough to replace. I'm expecting the Chiefs to draft offensive tackle at the end of the first round, and possibly draft multiple offensive tackles in this draft. But yeah, so. Chiefs and the Chiefs also their center Austin Ryder, who was really good for them last year. He's a free agent, so he's probably not back now. So there's that. Chargers signed center Corey Linsley, Packers All-Pro. I think I talked about that yesterday, but 5 years, $62 million. Not a bad contract. As far as I was concerned, I believe it was a 5-year deal, or was it 4-year? I think it's a 5-year. It's the biggest contract handed out to a center all time. So just ahead of the previous biggest, which I'm trying to remember who got that deal. Because I know Mitch Morse, when the Bills signed him from the Chiefs a couple years ago, it was like 4 for 40 something. And Matt Paradis last year, I believe it was, the Panthers signed him, and he got pretty good or a pretty big outlay too. But I'm blanking. And Linsley got pretty much the whole first 2 years of that contract guaranteed, and I think some of year 3. So good for him. And so far, the best deal I think anyone has signed in free agency so far, the Browns shoring up arguably the biggest weakness on their roster. They signed safety John Johnson III from the Rams, who's a really good player on that defense. 3 years, $33.75 million, and I believe I'm going to say he got somewhere between $22 and $24 million guaranteed on that. So some of that, or a little bit of that year 3 money, guaranteed. That's a really good deal. John Johnson is a Pro Bowl level safety. He can play deep half coverage, deep third coverage. He can play center field for you, in cover 1 sets. He can play as a robber or in robber coverage. He can play underneath coverage. He's good against the run. I don't know if he's played much slot, but I do know he can play. It's like any type of safety, or any safety role that you could ask of either your free safety or strong safety. He can play and do it at an above average to great level. This is a really good signing for the Browns, and it's really not bad money. If anything, I'm kind of surprised that. Well, there's part of me that's kind of surprised that he only got that much money. Although it is kind of becoming that safety is becoming kind of the running back of the defense, which a lot of people thought that was going to be like off-ball linebacker. But it seems to really be safety. Although I would say more so it's more strong safeties and guys who have a little more of a confined role at safety. But Johnson's so versatile. I'm really surprised he only got $11.25 million a year. Considering I don't think maybe he's not as dynamic an athlete as say Landon Collins was a couple years ago, but I'd say he's as good, if not right now better than Landon Collins, and he's not getting paid like it. Some other free agent deals that I've seen. Oh, dadgummit. I'm blanking on that one. Oh, the Broncos picked up Von Miller's option on his contract. So basically, today, the Broncos had to make a decision by today on whether they were going to pick up this option on Von Miller's contract or not. And basically, what it does is it guarantees $7.5 million of his $17 million salary for this season. If they didn't pick up that guarantee, he would have become a free agent outright. And what the Broncos are probably going to do now is they're probably going to renegotiate this contract to move some of that money beyond the guaranteed money into the future. Because Von Miller's 32, and he's starting to kind of have some health or some injury issues. And they have a younger, really good player in Bradley Chubb, who I believe got hurt and missed last year, which stinks because his rookie year he had 12 sacks. So Von Miller will not be joining the free agent market. He is a Bronco and is going to stay a Bronco. The Jets, I mentioned them signing Lawson and Davis, I believe, yesterday. But wide receiver Corey Davis formerly of the Titans, I mentioned him earlier. He signed a 3-year, $37.5 million deal with the Jets with $22 million guaranteed, I believe it was. For the Jets, probably a good deal. Davis is still very young. He's only 25, or maybe he'll turn 26 by the time the season starts. So I believe he's only 25. He's coming off his best season. He was consistent all season. He's a strong athletic receiver. He's 6'3", 215. And honestly plays a little thicker than that. He's got good long speed, good contested catch receiver. He was actually, the Jets were the worst contested catch team, only catching 42% of passes where the defender was within 3 feet of the receiver. So basically within a yard. Or was it 3 feet or 3 yards? Maybe it was within 3 yards. But 42% catch rate. That's not good. Davis will help with that, and he's a strong run blocker. Which people are like, who cares if your receiver is a strong run blocker? It's like I do, because keeping corners out of plays or guys who can get after safeties or crack inside and stop or slow down like linebackers on outside runs. That matters. That's it really is important, especially if you're a more run focused team. And when you're playing a scheme like the Jets should be, bringing that Kyle Shanahan offense, and running a lot of play action and running the ball a lot. Yeah, you need to. It's like Corey Davis fits exactly what they should be looking for in that scheme. So that's a good deal for them. Although I'm glad the Titans aren't paying that kind of money for him, personally, because we have a number one in A.J. Brown. I mean, I like Davis. I love that we drafted him when we drafted him several years ago, but he really hadn't been what I expected. Or he hadn't been consistently good until this year. So, and it was a contract year. So, and then they also signed Carl Lawson, or the Jets also signed Carl Lawson, defensive end from the Bengals. Sack production not great, only 5 sacks. But if you're looking at QB hits last year, I think he had 32, which was second only to TJ Watt in the league, and his combined quarterback pressures, which is hurries, hits, and sacks, I think it was 58, which was also one of the top marks in the league. Lawson he gets pressure on the quarterback, and the Jets need a dynamic edge, and you pair him with a guy like Quinnen Williams, who really looked the part of an elite interior rusher last year. And not that the Bengals didn't have some really good players alongside him. You got Geno Atkins is still there, but he's not the Geno Atkins of old. He is Geno Atkins, who is now old. But he's still Geno, still quality interior rusher. DJ Reader, big nose tackle type guy, has more pass rush push than he gets credit for, though. But Williams is a more dynamic player, and I would say that pairing him and Lawson should help both. That doesn't preclude the Jets from taking a pass rusher, though, potentially in this draft, on day 2, rounds 2 or 3. But Lawson, I think, fits the profile of the kind of guy that Robert Saleh likes for his defense, or Saleh. Saleh. Or Saleh. It's S-L-A. S-A-L-E-H. Hey, I just saw your thing. John Ross to the Giants, 2.5 mil. Thanks for helping the blind man out. That's not a bad deal for the Giants, actually. I still believe. Where's can I get my? I still believe in John Ross. Still believe in John Ross. They needed a speed threat, and I think John Ross, at 2.5 million, that's a cheap deal. That's a cheapo deal. Having him and Darius Slayton on the field at the same time should create some nightmares for teams. I can imagine some interesting clear out stuff with Ross and Slayton. Slayton's really good at a specific number of routes. Slayton is really good at getting really good separation on slants. And I can imagine you running Ross on kind of like a slot fade and having Slayton run like a fake out slant. Jab, like kind of setting up like he's jabbing for a quick out and then coming back inside for the slant from like that outside positioning. And Ross just creating tons of space for Slayton to run into. Because when Ross is healthy, he's a productive player. I mean, this guy had 7 touchdowns in 2019. I think it was 2019. And on a small number of catches, like the guy's dynamic, and I mean, you can't teach, or I mean, you don't find guys with his speed because no one has ever run a 4.22 40 before. And he's a great athlete. I mean, I loved him at Washington. Like the guy has special talent, and it's just unfortunate that he's going to have to deal with, does Daniel Jones get him the ball? Because, man, I would much rather be catching passes from like a Joe Burrow or Justin Herbert, because honestly, the Chargers could have used a deep threat or like a speedy type receiver like John Ross. But I like that for the Giants, and if they give him a shot, I like it for John Ross. I really hope it works out for him. Actually, I was kind of hoping my Titans were going to throw a small flyer deal at him. So thank you, Brunk, or BRNK, I think is. Sorry, I'm super blind. So I appreciate it. There's another deal I saw this morning. But I was talking about Carl Lawson, but I think Carl Lawson fits really well with the Jets as a pass rusher. Salah likes, Carl Lawson's, he's a really athletic guy. He's strong. He's a powerful rusher, but he's also got a really good, or pretty nice first step. He's really athletic. Very much reminds me of, he's not as quick as D Ford, but he's stronger than D Ford. So I'd say maybe he's a little more balanced kind of D Ford type. D Ford's not a good comp for Lawson. Physically, I guess I would argue he's like a little bit smaller Solomon Thomas in terms of like his athletic profile, but he's a better player than Solomon Thomas. Man, I tell you, a prospect me and a bunch of my friends missed on Solomon Thomas. But, I mean, athleticism doesn't always mean anything. I mean, guys set record numbers at the combine, and then they don't matter. Like, prime example, Stephen Paez. Like 43 reps on the bench or something, or like in the 40s. Maybe it was 44. He set like the bench press record. So, like, this is arguably the strongest player that's ever played in the NFL. He played several years with the Bears and then disappeared. Like, I mean, he wasn't special. And it wasn't like he was just strong, but he was slow. I mean, he was a decent athlete outside of just being strong, but didn't happen. So, and so far, John Ross, like, he's had explosive moments, but not consistent. But I really like him. Love his upside, especially on a $2.5 million deal. That deal looks kind of like Nelson Aguilar's deal last year with the Raiders, or trying to think another guy who took like a really cheapo deal recently and then went off. Well, heck, Shaq Barrett in 2019. Buccaneers picking up Barrett for 2019. I think they paid him like $4 million, and he had like I think it was 18 and a half sacks. Like, what are you doing, people? So yeah. Man, I feel like I'm missing another. Oh, Shaquille Griffin of the Seattle Seahawks signed with the Jacksonville Jaguars today on a multi-year deal. Did not see the dollar amount, but I believe it was a 4-year deal. And then the Seahawks, so his brother Shaquem Griffin, who is famous for being, I believe, the first player in NFL history to be drafted who is missing a hand. Like, because of a birth defect, he had to have his left hand amputated. The Seahawks did not pick or did not tender him as a restricted free agent. He's a really good special teams player. He played outside linebacker. He started off as a safety and then moved to outside linebacker when Scott Frost got to UCF, and he and Shaquille were huge in that team's turnaround. But he was a kind of a beast of a pass rusher. But he ran like a 4.38 40 as an outside linebacker. Like, dude's ridiculous. So it'd be kind of interesting to see him follow his brother to the Jags. And honestly, the Jaguars could use a guy like Griffin to help improve their special teams and their depth at linebacker. And I mean, like, that speed as a blitzer, like, gosh, give me that, please. There's got to be a way you could scheme that guy a role for sure. Let's see. Let's see. Some different other notes. Got to that. There's definitely one more that I'm missing here. I'm gonna give it like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah, I can't remember. Shaq Barrett re-upped with the Buccaneers before everything. I don't think I mentioned that yesterday. 4 years, $68 million. So Shaq Barrett, who is coming off of, he was a quality situational pass rusher with the Broncos, goes to the Buccaneers, has an 18.5 sack season. Last year with way more focus on him, was still a beast. Had, I think, 10 sacks last season. Something like that. It was either 9.5, 10, or 10.5 sacks. While creating a lot of pressure on quarterbacks, if not getting quite as many sacks. 4 years, 68 for him compared to 4 years, $64 million for Leonard Floyd. Give me Barrett. And I want to say Barrett's like the same age. Maybe a year younger. He might be a year younger than Floyd. So, but at the very least, they're the same age. And Barrett has been more productive for a longer period of time. You know. But the Rams, they didn't want to lose Floyd. Apparently, they really like his tools, and they obviously believe that they can keep him at like a double-digit sack level, or at least as productive as he was last year, or somewhere in that region. So, but I don't know if I believe in that. And I'd rather have Carl Lawson at 3 years, $45 million than Floyd, even with Lawson's kind of, injury history. And the fact that Lawson's sack numbers have never been very high, but I don't know. It's like his pressures, hurries, like his quarterback hits, it's like he gets there. So I don't know. Is there really that big a difference? I would put it this way. Yes, a sack causes a team to lose yards, but if the guy is getting a hit on the quarterback at the second highest rate in the NFL, that probably means that quarterback is throwing an incompletion, potentially getting a grounding call if he's not outside the pocket and doesn't get it near anyone or get it downfield, or or he's just chucking it out of bounds. Like, I mean, if he's throwing the ball away, throwing an inaccurate pass, then I'm okay with a QB hit instead of a sack. Like, it's not that big a difference. It's still a negative play for the offense. It's just not quite as negative. Don't get too caught up in sack numbers, or else you're going to end up being the person that pays Vic Beasley. You don't want to pay Vic Beasley. And the Tennessee Titans signed Bud Dupree yesterday to a 4-year contract. I believe it was also, I'm trying to remember if it was for $64 million or $56 million. I think it was also a 4-year, like, $64 million contract. Or maybe it was 4 years, 60 flat for Dupree. But I'd also rather have Dupree, even though he's coming off even though he's had a torn ACL. Dupree has been really productive past few years, 2-3 years. His sack numbers weren't great 3 years ago. I think he only had like 4.5, but his pressure rate was high. Once again, people get too caught up in sacks. It's like if the guy's consistently moving quarterbacks off their spots, forcing them to throw before they're ready, forcing them to throw the ball away, or hitting them and causing the ball to be inaccurate. That's almost as valuable. I mean, that's very close to as valuable as a sack. I mean, so I like Dupree. Titans desperately need a pass rusher, and we should still draft one, if not round 1, in round 2 or 3. But that does allow us now to focus on maybe snagging a corner or trying for the second year in a row at finding a right tackle in a really good tackle class. Although that might be something where I'm like, yeah, we could wait till round 2 or 3 to, go after offensive linemen. Or I would love, now that we have Dupree, I'm like, okay, we got Dupree, we got Landry, like, let's draft a receiver round 1. Get us a dynamic playmaker to go with AJ Brown. Or, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be like, I mean, in that range, we're looking at where we're picking. Kadarius Toney of Florida could still be on the board. That would give us a really dynamic, like, slot receiver. Rondale Moore of Purdue, although I think he might be a second rounder now, but I'd be okay with him in the late first. really athletic guy. I'd like to see his pro day numbers. But on tape, I mean, Rondale Moore is very fast when he's healthy. That's my issue is his health, and that's what will probably push him to second round. But if KJ Hamler was a second round pick last year, if you are getting Rondale Moore in the same range that the Broncos got KJ Hamler, you are getting a better player because Moore is at least as fast. He's thicker built than Hamler. He's stronger than Hamler. He's a better he's better on contested catches. If anything, Rondale Moore he has a little bit of Steve Smith in him, although he's not quite as physical as Steve Smith. But I really like Rondale Moore there. Terrace Marshall of LSU. Legit 6'3". It's like people are talking up him being a burner. People are talking up him potentially having 4.3 speed. I don't know about that, but I would not be shocked if he ran in like the 4.4s. Terrace Marshall is a smooth operator. He's got 23 touchdowns, I think, over the last 2 seasons. So, I'm a fan. It's like he would literally be a like-for-like replacement for Davis, who we just lost. And I don't know. And he might end up being better than Davis. He doesn't have. I don't think he had, because Davis kind of had a little bit of some injury red flags, because I think he had to have foot surgery or whatever before his rookie year. And he kind of had some injury stuff that kind of hurt his ability to try and be consistent, like his first 3 years in the league. Marshall doesn't seem to have that. And his ball skills and his contested catch skills are awesome. And Marshall's actually really good in the screen game for a guy as tall and long as he is. So I really like him. Rashad Bateman out of Minnesota. Keenan Allen type receiver, although I think he's more athletic than Keenan Allen. Not as good of a route runner as Keenan Allen. He's not quite that, but I mean he's really good and he could get there. He's absolutely got those skills. But he's a good all-around receiver. Bateman can just own in between the numbers in the intermediate game, but he's really good outside. I like Bateman. And then some guys like and then there's Elijah Moore. I'd be cool with us getting Elijah Moore. A lot of people, it seems like he's probably going to go second round. Like I totally would be fine with Elijah Moore going to a team in the late first. I think Moore is really good. This is another extremely talented receiver class. And at the top is actually probably a better class than last year. Which I had Justin Jefferson number 1 last year. I think I mentioned that yesterday. He was number 1 for me out of the receivers last year. Although most people had it kind of separated as Henry or Jerry Jeudy, CeeDee Lamb, Henry Ruggs in some order as the top 3, and then you had Jefferson, Brandon Ayuk, T. Higgins, and then apparently the Eagles had Jalen Rieger ahead of Jefferson and Ayuk and those guys. I didn't. I thought Rieger was a little overrated. His combine, like everyone was talking that Rieger was just as athletic as Ruggs, and not that your combine stats mean everything, but the guy's obviously not as fast and not as explosive as Henry Ruggs. Just not. That doesn't mean he doesn't have a good future, but I didn't have him. I had him as squarely a second round guy. Maybe I don't even think I had him in my top 50 players, and he went, where the Eagles draft 21. That's where they drafted him. 22, maybe it was 22, and then the Vikings picked Jefferson up at 23 or whatever. But I had Jefferson receiver number 1. I mean, when his combine numbers were as good or better than in pretty much across the board than Judy and Lamb, I was like, and all those, it's like it matched up with the tape for me. Jefferson was really good, and Jamar Chase obviously played the number 1 for them, but like Jefferson broke the rookie receiving yards record last year. Like he was really good. I felt really good about him, and I mean, but he exceeded anybody's expectations. And the crazy thing is, I still would argue that I would probably take Chase or Smith over Jefferson moving forward. It's close, but those two are still probably better prospects than even Jefferson still. I'd like to see what Devontae Smith runs in the 40. And I'd like to see what his measurables are there, but I just see him as Devontae Smith is just Marvin Harrison 2.0 but longer. I like Jamar Chase a lot. And then Jalen Waddle. Jalen Waddle's a better receiver than Henry Ruggs. He was according to the GPS tracking data, Jalen Waddle was the fastest man in college football last year. Or at least among receivers, but I'm pretty sure he was. It's like I know he's the fastest man in this receiver class on GPS data. I believe he was the fastest player in the country. Which Ruggs ran a 4.27 40 last year. Like, Ruggs extremely fast. But Waddle's in that same ballpark. But Waddle is a better player. He's got more. He's not quite as thickly built as Ruggs. He's not quite as strong as Ruggs. But he is a smoother player than Ruggs. He changes speeds better than Ruggs. He's more elusive. He's a more dynamic playmaker with the ball in his hands. And he's a better route runner. So I would take all three of these guys ahead of the top 3 receivers taken last year. And I'd put them in the group with Justin Jefferson, like in terms of ability. Although I'd probably still take Jefferson over Waddle. But it just depends on what you want in a receiver. I just love silky, savvy route runners who just receivers who are really smooth, change speeds well, and typically have like all around games. I like guys who can, and I like guys who can be not just guys who elevate the slot position. Because like Kadarius Toney to me he's a slot receiver. He's a high end slot receiver, but he's a slot receiver. Jefferson is an outside receiver, is a guy who can absolutely play outside, but who, when moved to the slot, is a complete nightmare. Kind of like Antonio Brown. When Antonio Brown would run routes out of the slot in his prime in Pittsburgh. So, but that's, yeah. So I'm a big fan of guys like Devontae Smith and Justin Jefferson. I think they're very similar players. And that's why Devontae Smith's my number 1. So now I've talked about Frizz, and I've been talking about some other position groups, but I'm going to get into my quarterbacks. This is going to be how I finish up the show. Anybody who's watching, if you've got some free agent stuff, if you've got any questions about what I think about anything, or if you've got some contract info, new signings, whatever, if I missed something today or that's come out, it's like if you drop it in the chat, I'd appreciate it. But I'm going to get into my top 10 quarterbacks. So, while I don't think it's crazy to maybe like someone better than him, Trevor Lawrence is clearly the number one quarterback prospect. The guy has been a stud since he got under center at Clemson. He has been a stud. Uh, Clemson has played for the national championship twice. They've made it to the playoffs every year with him at quarterback. Although they've made it basically every year of the playoff, I think, just about it. So, between Deshaun Watson and Trevor Lawrence at quarterback. But he has like every tool you could want. The dude is 6'6". He's a little slender, particularly in the lower body. But he has great athleticism. His long speed's great, and he's actually more slippery than people give him credit for, because he's not necessarily like jitterbug quick, but he's able to bend and contort his body to dodge contact in a way that's pretty impressive for a guy who's 6'6". But he gets his foot in the ground, he takes a couple steps, and I mean, he outruns defensive backs. Like, this guy has great long speed at the quarterback position. One thing that I have noticed, I'll get to his strengths and I'll get to this point. Dude has a great arm, amazing arm, very accurate arm, great touch. He doesn't really get flustered. He seems, by all accounts, he just exudes leadership. He has every tool you would want in the tool bag for a quarterback. Processes the game really well, makes quick decisions, takes care of his sophomore year, he got a little aggressive for a bit, but for the most part, his decision making is good, and he does his best to take care of the football. But one thing I've noticed is, I don't think he senses pressure all that well. Now, maybe it's that there's a difference between not feeling it and ignoring it. And I think I'm leaning towards he's not sensing it consistently. He's not Joe Burrow, who just has uncanny pocket awareness, or Mac Jones has the best pocket awareness in my opinion, of any quarterback in this draft, in terms of his ability to sense pressure, manipulate the pocket, and keep his eyes downfield. Because you can sense pressure and bail out too early. Like, there's a difference between being oversensitive to pressure, which is why I have Jones because like Fields senses pressure really well. Zach Wilson senses pressure extremely well. But I think Jones pocket awareness. But we'll get to those guys. Lawrence, I think he could improve his pocket sense. That being said, though, if you have a really good offensive line around him, that's not going to matter all that much. And the Jaguars are going to draft him number 1. And they just traded for Orlando Brown, who's been one of the best right tackles in the league since he's been drafted. He wants to play left tackle. I think they're going to let him. They franchised Cam Robinson, who had been their left tackle, since they drafted him in the second round in 2017. So that's a $14.5 million franchise tag, which makes me think they're going to try and negotiate that and probably get that salary for this year down. Potentially. I don't know. they might kick Robinson inside the guard. Which there's a lot of people, even when like he was getting drafted, there's a lot of people who are like, maybe he should kick inside the guard. And he's been kind of up and down in pass pro. Like last year, I think was actually his worst pass protection year in the league so far, at least according to like his pass rusher win rate, or I guess for him pass block win rate. Or they could slide him to right tackle and move Jawan Taylor, their right tackle, who they drafted in the second round in 2019, who I thought was a steal in the second round. Although he hadn't been amazing, like he's a road grader in the run game. They could move him into guard, but they'll probably leave Cam on the left side, move him into guard, and then, man, Brown and Robinson on the left side would be really good for your run game. And having Taylor at right tackle, I mean. And then Brandon Linder at center, and you've got Andrew Norwell at right guard. Or is Norwell their left guard? So Cam might, if they moved him into guard, might be moved to right guard. I don't know. But anyway, you have it's like they look like they have a solid offensive line. And any improvement in pass pro from Taylor and or Robinson would absolutely make a bit of that pocket sense a moot point for Lawrence. So he's my number one. I'm going to move on. My number 2 is Zach Wilson out of BYU. I have him number 2, not Fields. Yes, this day has been a little bit boring for free agents because so much hit day one, and I think there's a lot of teams that are still trying to figure out stuff. Thank you for coming and tuning in the show, Packers GOAT. If I'm not boring you to death, please drop a like and maybe hit a subscribe. I'm trying to start something here. I appreciate all you guys for popping in. But yeah, so Zach Wilson's my number 2 quarterback. I'm a huge fan of Wilson. I actually think he's not that far behind Lawrence. I think he did a lot with the talent he had available at BYU, and did a good job of dealing with. Yes, the Coastal Carolina game wasn't great, but I think that had more to do with Coastal Carolina's defense was awesome, and BYU's outside of their left tackle. BYU's offensive line was overmatched the entire game. And it's hard to evaluate a quarterback when his offensive line does not give him any time at all. Like if the guy's running for his life. Which is one thing that I think kind of saves Fields when you're looking at the Indiana tape is like, yeah, although some of the stuff is like definitely bad and concerns me. But there are some plays where it's like, well, of course Fields had a bailout, or Fields was under pressure a lot because of Indiana's creative defensive, or creative pass rush schemes. They were really aggressive. I mean, this was some NFL level stuff that Indiana was pulling on Ohio State. So, be fair to Fields there. His offensive line wasn't picking these up, so he was put in bad situations. At the same time, there were still things in that game where it's like, yeah, but you sat on that read too long, or you saw that guy coming open and you were late. And that shows up consistently on tape, even in his good games. So, but anyway, I'll get to Fields. Wilson has a great arm. He has great mobility. He's not as explosive as Fields, but he actually might be laterally smoother and quicker than Fields. But his mobility is strong. He's got a great arm. He might be the best his deep passing out of all of the quarterbacks this draft might be the best, in my opinion, and the most consistent. Between like balancing arm strength and touch and everything. And actually, Lawrence, despite having a great arm tool, his deep accuracy, which some of that this past season was because of the receivers he had at his disposal. Like, he didn't have a T. Higgins. He didn't have a Justin Ross type guy. He didn't have a Mike Williams type guy. Although he did have Powell, and Powell is a big-bodied receiver, but I think Powell is like a day 3 developmental guy. Like, you can find a bunch of guys who are like 6'3", 6'4", 6'5", 6'6", aren't very fast, aren't very great route runners, they don't have like any real special traits other than their size and having, plus athleticism, but not being elite athletes at their position. Those guys are a dime a dozen. Some of them hit, some of them don't. So it's like you have Powell and a guy like Amari Rodgers, although at his pro day, Amari Rodgers was not as fast top end as I thought. He's quick, he's sudden, but Rodgers only ran, I think he ran, one of his 40s was like a 4.53, 4.54, and then the other was like a 4.5 flat. I really expected him to be in the 4.4s. But at the same time, against other players, Rodgers creates separation, and to me, his play speed is a little faster to me than that 40 time. So, but Lawrence didn't have Chris Olave like Justin Fields last year. Lawrence didn't have Devontae Smith or Jalen Waddle or even a Mechie like Mac Jones. Didn't have and he didn't have like Kyle Pitts like Kyle Trask. He had okay options. So his downfield accuracy, or lack of downfield production, I'm gonna kind of. It's not like a major concern for Lawrence, but compared to like Wilson and Fields and Mac Jones and Kyle Trask and other quarterbacks in this group, it was kind of. He just wasn't as dominant downfield as you would think from an elite quarterback prospect. Because I want to say his completion percentage, like on throws 20+ yards downfield, or on like the big wow throws downfield, it was like 33% or 32%. And you had guys like Fields and Jones who were up over like 50, 60%. Or Fields, I want to say, was around 50%. I think Mac Jones completed like over 60% of his throws that were that deep. Which is insane. It's insane. So, yeah, I think Wilson has all the tools in the book. And he's really good at reading the field. He processes information real quick. He throws guys open. Guys don't have to be, because there's a difference between what wide open is at the college level and the NFL level. At the college level, there's more space. Like the NFL level, the level of the worst players goes up. The average talent at corner goes up. At linebacker goes up. Safety goes up, obviously. So windows are tighter in the NFL. Wilson is already comfortable making those types of throws. Whereas Justin Fields has a tendency to wait until guys are wide open. or they're in a situation where it's like I know he's going to outrun this guy, so he's already open, and it's obvious. So that's why I have Wilson at 2. I don't really see any weaknesses in his game. I mean, he's made some mistakes, but like for the most part, like especially this year, if you're watching his 2020 tape, I don't really see any weaknesses with Wilson. I don't see at all. And he still has a lot of room to grow as a player and a prospect, which is why, like, I would say that Wilson is closer to Lawrence than he is to the other quarterbacks in this class. I really don't think he's that much behind Lawrence. I think he's easily he should go number 2. Yeah. So it's like Lawrence is 1, Wilson is like very close to, and then my number 3 quarterback is actually Mac Jones. I am not the guy who it is extremely easy to say that Fields and Lance are more athletic, stronger arms. They obviously have higher ceilings, so that makes them better prospects. That's not the only way that I judge way that I judge prospects. Because I am projecting the future and looking at possible outcomes. And I don't see Lawrence busting. I don't think Wilson busts. Well, it depends. Everyone can bust depending on if they're put in a crappy situation. I think the Jaguars they have a strong offensive line from them. Yes, they traded DJ Chark to get Orlando Brown, so that hurts their receiving core, but they do have Laviska Shenault there. I think Keelan Cole is still there. Maybe he's a free agent. Chris Conley's still there. They will likely acquire another receiver. That just seems to be a given. They're probably going to draft one, and they might be trying to go after a guy like Kenny Galladay or Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin got franchised. They might try and get a Juju Smith-Schuster, but I would say that the Jaguars are probably going to draft a wide receiver somewhere in the first 3 rounds to go along with Shenault. And I would probably assume they're probably going to bring in some free agent. And they probably should also upgrade at tight end. Although they do have a young tight end that I think they drafted last year, the year before, that showed some flashes. So, but getting back to Mac Jones, I just don't see where Mac Jones just totally fails because of the mental makeup of his game. He processes information faster than any quarterback in this draft. He reads the field better than any quarterback in this draft. He reads, he recognizes, processes everything. He does an amazing job of taking care of the football. And I mentioned earlier, he has the best pocket awareness in this draft. This guy senses pressure like Joe Burrow does. He manipulates the pocket in a manner very Tom Brady-esque. I think some of obviously he's not as athletic as the other 4 top quarterbacks and some of the other quarterbacks like further down the board past that. But it's like everyone talked about he's not going to hurt you with his legs. And it seemed like once or twice every game he would pick up like 9+ yards after like dodging a rusher and just taking off upfield. No, you're not going to run a bunch of designed runs with him. But the guy has more than enough functional mobility. This guy is not he is not a statue. He's not Trask. Jones moves in the pocket. He feels pressure really well. I'm tired of hearing about like the athletic limitations of Jones because they're because to a large degree, because of how athletic a lot of the quarterbacks are in this class, people are believing that Jones is just not athletic at all, and that is not true. Jones' lack of athleticism is absolutely overstated. And his lack of arm strength. That guy was arguably the best deep passer in the country last year. He has plenty of arm strength, and that can be improved. It's like he has really good mechanics, but you can tweak mechanics a little to improve arm strength, and he might get in an NFL program, and depending on what team he's at, they can improve his arm strength. Like, he can get stronger to where, like, he can get a little more zip on it. But his touch is incredible. His ball placement is incredible. For most of Drew Brees' career, like, Drew Brees never had a rocket arm. And after his shoulder surgery, but, like, up until recent years, like, Drew Brees was an elite deep ball passer for most of his time with the Saints. Didn't have a cannon arm. Tom Brady has never had a cannon arm. That guy still in his at 43 years old, still hitting some deep balls. Like, I'm not worried about that. Like, that is just it. I don't think should be as concerning to people. Yes, that means that he can't make throws that Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen can. Oh well. He does so many other things extremely well that I'm not worried about it. He might be the most accurate passer in the class. I mean, statistically speaking, he is, but I think he might be the most accurate thrower in the class. It's him or Wilson. I love his ball placement, and he does these other things, like these subtle things to manipulate defenses. There was this double move that Devontae Smith ran in, I want to say it was the Georgia game. And Smith makes this dig cut before cutting back upfield up the seam. And right as Smith is making that like jab step, like in perfect sync with Smith on the jab step to the inside, Jones pump fakes. And it pulled that safety, the defensive back, he bites so hard, and Smith is just wide open. It's like, so a lot of people are like, yeah, well, it's easy to complete all these passes when, like, the guys are running wide open. I'm like, yeah, but he also puts it perfectly to where the guy doesn't have to slow down. Because, yeah, I could heave the ball downfield and Smith was going to catch it, but he would have had to have stopped and maybe gets caught, whatever. That's not happening with Jones. Like, Jones has plenty of arm strength, great timing, but Jones helps create those throwing lanes for his receivers. And against Ohio State, that throw that he had to Najee Harris, where the pressure is obviously coming, and he invited that, and if you watch the replay, he practically threw a no-look pass out to Najee running the wheel. I mean, the guy has great sense. He makes plays. He's not as dynamic which Burrow wasn't the most athletic, but Burrow's a more dynamic athlete than um, than Jones. But Jones has a lot of similarities to Burrow. Because a lot of people, there was a little bit of a knock on Burrow's arm strength too. And I'm like, I just look at Jones and it's like, yes, this guy can fail. And at least one of these quarterbacks is going to totally fail, statistically speaking, and probably two of them. Or at least one's going to fail and one's going to disappoint. But Jones is my number 3 because he has all the mental skills that you want in a quarterback. And for the most, and he it's like his arms, he doesn't have a weak arm. He doesn't have a noodle arm. This isn't like, his arm's better than Gardner Minshew. And Gardner Minshew's arm strength's not bad. But, like, this isn't Luke Falk. How about I use that? We're not talking about Luke Falk. We're not talking about Kellen Moore. We're not talking about Chad Pennington post-shoulder surgeries. Like, Mac Jones is squarely in, like, the Tom Brady range with his arm. And to be honest, like, I'm looking at Mac Jones, and I've looked back at scouting reports of Tom Brady, like, back, and it's like, Jones' scouting report's better than that. So, and also, Jones was replacing Tua Tagovailoa, who at that point was basically the best quarterback in the history of Bama, or it's him and like Joe Namath, and I think Bart Starr also played there, but Bart Starr, like, in terms of passing, like, I'm not going there. Not even gonna put him with those guys. But Tua, broke a bunch of records, and then Jones comes in and has the best season in the history of, like, that program. And he beat out 5-star Bryce Young to do so. And a lot of people really expected Bryce Young to, like, win that job last year. Like, that was the expectation, was he was going to beat Mac Jones out. And I wasn't convinced, because I thought Mac Jones, despite kind of a rough start against Auburn, he played really well for most of that game, and he battled and kept them in it. And then he demolished Michigan in the bowl game. And I was pretty convinced that Mac Jones was going to actually be pretty freaking good this past year. Did not expect him to be better than Tua, though. Because honestly, right now, I think I would take him over Tua. And I was really high on Tua. So then at number 4, it really could go either way. I prefer Trey Lance to Justin Fields. Because Trey Lance, he's stronger than Fields. I think he's a more dynamic athlete than Fields. And his 2019 season, the guy didn't throw an interception. He accounted for 4,200 total yards, 2,800 passing. Or wait, let me back up there. I think it was like close to 4,000 total yards. It was like 2,800 passing, and it was like 1,100 rushing. So it was like 3,900 yards. And then it was like 28 passing touchdowns and like 14 rushing touchdowns or something like that. And no interceptions. And I can't remember if he lost a fumble. He might not have turned the ball over once. If he did, it was, I think, maybe one fumble. But still, like, that's ridiculous. That's just plain ridiculous. So he's really raw, but he's kind of like a smaller Josh Allen because like Josh Allen was 6'5", 240. Lance is like 6'2" and a half, 6'3", 230 or 225. But he is way more athletic than Allen. And he's got that dynamic arm. Like, to me, he's got just a ridiculous ceiling. And he's inexperienced. I would say that there's an argument to be made that he kind of should remind people that Mitchell Trubisky only had like the 1 year of starting experience, but his tape was way better than Trubisky. And Trubisky didn't transfer out of a program where he got beat out by, honestly, not quite as highly touted recruits. He like transferred out of Ohio State, and then he could not beat out a 3-star quarterback that was at North Carolina, and when he took over, the team wasn't as good. So, but he had to wait for that guy to graduate. So I like Lance. He's the most raw out of all of them, and he played like the lowest level of competition, but I don't know. I really like Lance. And then you have Fields, and I just think out of all these guys, I think Lance has a slightly higher ceiling, and I only think he has a slightly higher bust potential than Fields. And I could be wrong. And honestly, like, great if I'm wrong. And Fields is successful. I don't want to see people fail. But I look at Fields and watching him like this year, shortened season. He was amazing in 2019. And then, of course, his receiver has taken all the blame for like that interception at the end of the Clemson game because it was an option route, or they do option routes, and he made the wrong choice. I don't know. All I know is Fields threw an interception in the game. And he made some other mistakes in that game. But this year, he lit up Clemson, but Clemson's defense was so overrated this year. Particularly their secondary. And during the game, I believe Tanner Muse, their top safety, got ejected. And then, of course, Skalski also got ejected for a hit during the game. Maybe Tanner Muse was out with an injury, something like that. But either way, he looked really good against Clemson, but against the other three good teams that they faced that year or last year, he had a mad game against Bama. That's one I don't necessarily hold against him, but we're splitting hairs here. We're splitting hairs between prospects, and he didn't impress against Bama like he did against Clemson. And I'm saying it was a mad game because Bama was really good and their defense was peaking at the end of the season. But against Northwestern and Indiana, he looked horrible. He threw 2 picks against Northwestern, completed less than 50% of his passes in that game, and looked utterly useless for the most part that game. Against Indiana, he actually threw a couple touchdowns, and ran for one, I think, as well. But he threw 3 interceptions that were bad. All of them were bad. And he made some other decisions, like in that game, that, I mean, and missed several open guys during the game. Like, will say that Indiana was bringing some exotic pressures that I don't know. The thing is, I don't know who calls the protections for Ohio State, whether it's the quarterback or the center. But Ohio State's line was getting, or he was under pressure a lot that game. And while he did show a lot of different times during that game, like his ability to bail out and make great play or make plays with his legs, I really feel like Indiana and Northwestern kind of it puts some doubt in my mind, because it seems like he processes slowly. It seems like he's sometimes late making decisions, and I think sometimes he bails out too quickly, but that doesn't necessarily bother me because usually when he bails out, it's a positive play for your team. And there are certain throws that, like, while he has the talent to make them, because he is sometimes slow to react, outside breaking routes are kind of dangerous for him. Especially against, and they will be at the pro level, unless he speeds up his timing and everything. I really think that, and because of how Ohio State's offense is run with all those option routes, so to a lot of degrees, he's reacting to receivers. I just don't know if that's gonna. I think that might hurt his transition, and we haven't seen an Ohio State quarterback translate to the next level yet. From that offense. Nor it's like, actually, we haven't seen a Urban Meyer or Urban Meyer system, like his system quarterback, translate to the NFL since Alex Smith. And even then, it took Alex Smith going through like 5 offensive coordinators. Like, it took Jim Harbaugh coming to town for him to get somewhere, or to like to really start like showing improvement. And that was like year 5, year 6. And then he was really great for Andy Reid in Kansas City. But he was drafted in 2005. None of Urban Meyer's quarterbacks at Florida really did much at the NFL level, particularly as passers. Because, Tebow did a lot of his damage with his legs. Except for that wild card round playoff game against the Steelers, where he just went off and threw for 300 yards and had a perfect deep ball on the first play of overtime to get Demaryius Thomas that game-winning touchdown in overtime. But, so we'll see with Fields. But Fields is my number 5 behind Lance. I did have Fields number 4. But it's like he and Lance are really right neck and neck with me. It's really more like 4A and 4B. So this is where it gets fun. And I'll probably be a little quicker with these last guys, and I'm going to wrap up. But at number 5, I have Kellen Mond. I mean, not number 5, number 6. I have Kellen Mond at number 6. He can be a little robotic. And despite his athleticism and ability to run and make plays with his legs, he doesn't a lot. I saw a lot of improvement from him last year in particular. He improved in year 3 as their quarterback, but I think he made big strides this year. I just think there's a lot of upside because of his athleticism and his traits. He's a pretty accurate passer. And he'll take care of the football. I actually think he improves his decision making every year, and although he'll probably frustrate some people, I would say he's like, if anything, he kind of reminds me of an Alex Smith. I actually think like I could see Kellen Mond being like Kansas City Alex Smith. Yeah. So if you're telling me like I could get, no, I'm not saying like that's a guarantee. I'm saying like I look at Kellen Mond and I'm like, yeah, this guy could be. I think this guy could turn into a solid NFL starter. You put him on a team. Like, I think he would fit on the Steelers. Sit behind Big Ben. Learn the offense, learn the system. He could become something. Go to Detroit. Start off behind Jared Goff and, learn some things. Go to the Rams and sit behind Matt Stafford. Stafford's got 2 years on that contract. He'll be like 35, I think, or in 2023. Something like that, 34. And maybe the Rams re-sign him, but at that point, Mond's like going into year 3. And maybe like, 4 years from now, summer of 2025, he's up for like a contract, or his rookie deal's up, but maybe they're comfortable with him going forward to start. I don't know. I'm just kind of projecting ahead, but I think Mond, his athleticism and his decision making, like, and his drive to avoid back-breaking mistakes, which seemed to be a thing like last year. Like, I'd take him. Like, he would be my like 3rd round, because I'm kind of the type of guy. It's like I'm gonna draft if the guy is like really good, I'm just gonna draft him in the 1st round. If I don't want to draft that guy in the 1st round, really, I don't want to draft if he's not good enough for a 1st round pick, I don't want to draft that guy in rounds 2 or 3. Maybe round 3, depending on like how the board falls and what other needs I have. But for me, I'm more like you draft him in round 1 or you draft him on day 3. So Mond, though, is the kind of guy, yeah, I'd take him in round 3. Then you have Kyle, after him at 7 is Kyle Trask, is my 7th quarterback. The guy's pretty accurate, although I would argue his ball placement could have been better. He had some hot streaks last year, but like Kyle Pitts kind of helps out in that regard. But there were games like against A&M. He couldn't beat A&M. Now, it's a team sport. Man, I don't know why I'm yawning. Because I'm not sleepy like I kind of started getting yesterday. I guess I'm getting used to like waking up earlier, so. For different reasons. But anyway. Trask is accurate, but Trask is statuesque and he doesn't sense pressure super well. And he's a lot bigger and thicker than like a guy like Mac Jones, a guy like Joe Burrow. So while like probably at his top speed he's as faster, and maybe even straight line might be a little bit faster than Mac Jones, he's not quick at all. He's not sudden. It takes him a while to get there. Like if he has space in front of him, like he can run up and move, but like Trask doesn't really. He's not nimble in a way that I would say Mac Jones is nimble. Like he can move around. Trask doesn't really have that, and Trask also doesn't have very good pocket sense. I think that the comps that are floating around of him to like Nick Foles are pretty apt. And he's and also like he's kind of streaky. Like he spent most of the season on a hot streak last year, but like the LSU game, he kind of faltered. He played really great against Alabama. And then he lost all of his weapons against Oklahoma, and he made some kind of boneheaded decisions early in that game. Like, but that was worrying. But he has 2 years of really good, of like of overwhelmingly positive tape, but with concerns in it. Like, but I would just say he's Nick Foles. And Nick Foles was I believe, like a 4th round pick. I would say Trask is, once again, like 2nd, 3rd round. I would say, like, he's a 3rd round guy. I'd say him and Mond are, like, 3rd rounders. But if they fell to, like, the 4th round, I'd, like, jump on them in a heartbeat. Like, even if I had an established starter, getting guys who profile as, like, top line backups and potential like at least average starters, like I feel like most teams would feel pretty comfortable going into the season with like Nick Foles or Alex Smith especially Alex Smith pre near death experience. Like as their backup quarterbacks, I feel like most people would be like ecstatic about that situation if they had a good starter. I'm not talking about like Bears fans who are like, it's Trubisky or Foles. You know what I mean? It's just I don't. But and there was a period of time where I was like, or during the season and like as this, going into like bowl season, I was like, man, Trask, there's 6 first-round quarterbacks in this draft. There's absolutely 6. Like, Trask is a first-rounder. I'm like, no, Trask is not a first-rounder. I've got some friends trying to convince me that Mac Jones isn't either, but I'm not having it. I'm not having it. Like, I can understand them having him as, like, the 5th first-round quarterback and having Lance and Fields above him. But Jones is my number 3. So Trask 7. My number 8. This is probably going to surprise people. Felipe Franks is my number 8 quarterback. I really liked how he played at Arkansas last year. And he had times at Florida that he looked really good. And his pro day was awesome. Like, I think he ran like a 4.55 40. And he's like 6'6", 230. Like, that's pretty boss. Although he is more of a pocket passer, and he's not like, especially with some of the lower leg injuries he's had, like he's not quite as agile, but like this is a guy who you can roll him out. This is a guy who can take off and punish you, especially once he gets up to speed. Like this guy who can truck corners and safeties. But he's got a big arm. He really improved the last 2 years, or really improved as a passer. He got hurt, which opened the door for Trask, but he was playing okay. before he got hurt at Florida. And then I thought he played really well for Arkansas last year. I think he's got a lot of upside. Um, like physically, in terms of physical talent, he's as physically talented pretty much as any quarterback in the class. I thought he improved his processing speed. Um, like he showed ability to get through progressions, read the field quicker at Arkansas, better decision making. He was more accurate, uh, and showed a little more touch and ability to like take a little bit off of the ball last year compared to his previous tape. But there's definite concerns. It's like he's a day three pick. I mean, I could see someone talking themselves into like picking him in the third round. I love his. It's like I mentioned the Steelers a minute ago, but like I actually love his fit for the Steelers. Like him learning from Roethlisberger, who very similar style of quarterback to me. I really like that the fit there. I also like the fit for him with my foot just went to sleep. That tingles. I like the fit for him actually with Minnesota. Although I think they really like Nate Stanley that they drafted. And his like long-term outlook. And I like Frank's fit. Actually, I would like Felipe Franks' fit in San Francisco because of his mobility on bootlegs and stuff in Kyle Shanahan's offense. Now that I'm thinking about it. And he'd be a quality like developmental backup behind Justin Herbert for the Chargers. It's like this guy's not going to take the starting job from Herbert, but if Herbert were to get hurt, you'd have a guy with very, very, very similar physical tools as your backup, and you wouldn't have to, which would mean you wouldn't have to shift a ton of your offense and expectations on different plays because of physical limitations, which I think is actually kind of a nice thing to have. And of course, he also fits the John Elway mold. So you'd have a more athletic Drew Lock, like a bigger, stronger, faster Drew Lock there, behind him. But anyway, number 9. So these are the guys I have the strongest opinions about are already kind of passed, or like I say, the strongest positive opinions about. So there's a few guys that are I've been working through for the last 2 spots. There's a lot of people really high on David Mills, or is it Davis Mills, out of Stanford. Really only got to start like 1 year, I think, but like Stanford coaches love him, rave about him. David Shaw like really thinks like he has a bright future ahead of him. He has he has raw tools, incredible arm, but he also just didn't look special in college. Like when he did play, he very much seems like, clay that can be molded, but sometimes like that clay is just clay. It's not going. It won't become anything special. So I don't know. I just and he doesn't really profile like the kind of player that goes like day 3. Although there's been buzz about him being like a third rounder. Some people saying third. Like I can kind of understand fourth, but like people are talking third, fourth, and I'm like I don't know. So I don't have David Mills up there or Davis Mills up there. So a lot of people really love Jamie Newman, and I have him at 9, but I don't love having him at 9 because I don't really believe in Jamie Newman. Jamie Newman has a lot of physical talent. But he wasn't like amazing at Wake. Like he didn't light the world on fire at Wake Forest. And when I saw him play at Wake Forest, they were pulling him and putting in a different quarterback because Newman wasn't getting things done. So I don't know. I don't see it. I think Newman made a massive mistake opting out of the season. Because I thought his and part of that was because there were people in the media who had him overhyped. Like, because, I mean, there were some mock drafts before the season that had him going in the first round. Like, and I just didn't see it. I didn't see it. I didn't understand it. And I still kind of don't see it. And honestly, there's part of me that doesn't even want to put him at 9. You know what? I'm not going to put him at 9. So Jamie Newman's out. Jamie Newman, Davis Mills, you're not in my top 10. Because Shane Buechele is my number 9 quarterback. I think, like, most likely, Buechele is a long-term backup, spot starter type. He could become, like, a starting NFL quarterback, you know, but I think he probably would be a bottom-range starter. I mean, to me, he's, like, a slightly more physically talented Case Keenum type. So, Buechele's 9 for me. And then my 10th quarterback, I mean, it comes down to, honestly, this one I'm just a little going just kind of with my gut on it. Or like just because part of me feels like he has no shot at really making it, but I really like Brady White out of Memphis. Like his ceiling's not as high as like say a Newman or a Mills. But I actually think Brady White could play in the NFL. Like, once you're getting this deep in most quarterback classes, like, because a lot of people are probably thinking, well, what about Ian Book? What about Sam Ehlinger? And I'm like, Sam Ehlinger had a great college career. I just don't see it in the pros for him. Although I could see him hanging around for a bit, I just don't see as much upside as I see with, like, say, a Brady White or even a Jamie Newman and a Davis Mills. Ian Book, also kind of undersized, but he's a little more athletic than Ehlinger, and I think I like Ian Book's pro chances better than Ehlinger. And Book does a pretty good job of taking care of the football too. So, Book almost got the 10 spot, but I'm giving it to Brady White. So, you know, laugh at me if you want, but I believe. So that's my 10 quarterbacks. I don't really have anything else to get to. Free agent news is kind of boring today. It's like I won't be on tomorrow but I will be on Thursday at 2 p.m. Central Time. Trying to rock this from 2 to 4. I started a little late today, but I'm trying to run about 2 hours. Yeah. So thanks for tuning in. If you tuned in, you want to hear like the earlier part of the show where I talked a little bit about different free agent stuff and also talked about a little bit some draft fits, because free agency and the draft go hand in hand for a few teams. Like once this is done, just start the archive version of this. The stream will automatically archive the channel. You can listen to it as a podcast. Please, if you did enjoy it, or just at the very least want to sympathetically help me out with getting my channel launched, if you could hit the like button, it really helps in the algorithm. I've been saying a little bit of this stuff. Like, if you could subscribe, like share it on social media. Although I don't know why you would do that. I mean, I would hope like maybe I've been that entertaining. But please, like, I prefer if you just shared it with your friends. Like, hey, was listening to this guy. I think he's pretty down to earth. I like him. He's not ESPN. He's not trying to make a bunch of hot takes, or, he's not drumming up or bullcrap rumors and stuff for clicks to stay relevant. So like, subscribe, hit the bell. If you want to be notified of the stream, please hit the bell and set notifications to all. I'd really appreciate it. And if you type in the chat, I am like glancing over and paying attention. I'm down to anyone who wants to throw in some information, or or even ask me some questions or challenge something I'm saying. Like, you got some different opinions, I'm down to debate. So really appreciate it. So this has been Blind Eye Live for Tuesday, March 16th, 2021. I will see you guys Thursday.